Hey, what's going on, guys? Steve here, Rake and Profit over at rakeandprofit.com. Last day of my thrift store adventure trip with my mom. Went from Connecticut out to Maryland. Hung out there for a couple days, didn't thrift. But today we're actually heading back from one side of Connecticut back to the other. We're going to probably hit like 8 or 10 thrift stores. Probably take 6-7 hours. Did really well. Found a bunch of stuff. But anyways, today I want to talk about putting a value on your items and putting a, I don't know if you want to call it a value, but putting a reasonable expectation of how long it's going to take to sell, and making sure that you kind of calculate and weigh this all out. Because if you're a new eBay seller, and a lot of thrift stores do this and pawn shops even do it as well, they'll put a value on an item based on maybe one sold listing, or they'll put a value on an item just based on, I don't know. Again, I always use this example, but say you're looking at maybe Pendleton shirts. They'll see a Pendleton that sells for 87 and they'll say, all right, I found a Pendleton, it's worth 87. But wait a second, that Pendleton was rare, it was vintage, it had leather elbow patches, it was unique, maybe it had a specific tag, and maybe only one of them sold. So you need to make sure when you're finding items, especially when you're new, you need to spend a good amount of time paying attention to the sold listings in the actual market. Now, there's a couple things to take a look at when you find an item. You want to take a look at the completed listings, the sold listings. So these are items that have actually sold. When you take a look at the completed listings, the difference between a completed listing and the sold listing is the sold have actually sold. Sometimes they'll sell for what they're asking, or there might be a line through it, which means the best offers was accepted. A completed listing will be in red versus the sold is green. And that means it is completed without a sale. And that's really good to know, because as an eBay seller, when you put your money out there, when you invest money in a product, that's money that's out of your pocket, that's in your business, that's being held up for a sale. So if you're seeing the sold listings at $25, and there's only a couple of them selling, and you have to spend $7-8, and maybe you'll profit $7 or $8, you got to ask yourself, how often is this item selling? Is it worth? There's a YouTube video going on. Is it worth putting your $7 or $8 on the line to wait for that sale? Maybe it's only selling, maybe there's only a couple sales over the last 6 months. It probably isn't worth your while. It's really easy to get unreasonable expectations in terms of how fast it's gonna sell and that you're gonna get the top dollar. You gotta take into consideration seasonality effect. You know, that item might have sold like textbooks on eBay. Same with Amazon. You might have gotten $80 for that textbook because it was September, but now it's November, students are already enrolled, you'll be lucky to maybe get $40, $45. It's seasonality. The same with maybe specific clothing items. Maybe if winter's over and now it's, you know, maybe it's springtime now, you might not get as much money for that puffer jacket versus when it was, you know, that perfect season. So you gotta take a look at the sold listings. How often is it selling? You gotta take a look at the completed listings. How often is it not selling, right? What's the sell-through rate? Are most of these items selling? Also, you wanna take a look at the price range. You know, you gotta find that specific comparable item. So, you know, if you're selling a specific clothing item, you gotta find that color, that size, that material, that design, that same tag, as close as you possibly can to see, you know, how strong is that sold listing? How strong is the sell-through rate? Because maybe the sell-through rate is horrible for that, you know, for that Pendleton brand. I'm just making something up. Maybe because there's like 80% of the stuff in the line people don't want, but that 20% has an amazing sell-through rate. So you got to consider the completed listings. You got to consider the sold listings. You got to take a look at how often is it actually selling? What's really selling well? And then you got to take a look at the price range, right? Take a look at the competition. You know, are they selling between 40 and 60? Or are there some outliers at 80, 85? Because a lot of people will come in and they'll overspend as a new seller. They'll see an item that sells for 85 and maybe that's an outlier price. Maybe it's normally selling for 45 and they're gonna spend $30 and they're gonna put themselves in a tough position. And you wanna make sure that you're very careful about that when you're a new seller. That's why I always tell the new sellers, buy items on a budget, you know? The thrift stores are competitive, yeah, and the garage sales are competitive, but you get items dirt cheap, really, really cheap. If you pick and choose, if you cherry pick. But it's also very easy at the thrift stores, kind of contradicting myself, to overpay because some of the thrift stores are getting ridiculous with pricing. So don't just take the first thing that you see and buy it. Kind of pick and choose, be careful, cherry pick, take a look at the sold listings, take a look at the completed listings, make sure that you're putting an accurate value on it, not just based on an outlier, right? If 10 items sold and the average is 50 and maybe one of them sold for 120, you've got to dig a little deeper and figure out why. Why is that an outlier? What happened, right? Was it just spectacular pictures? It's usually going to come down to there's something special about that item, probably the condition, or maybe there's some rarity, right? There's something unique about it. So you really got to dive into that and figure out what's truly going on, because that's one of the easiest ways to burn yourself. You're a new seller, you're on eBay, you don't have a lot of money to invest, and now you're buying items, you're overpaying for items that don't have a high sell-through. And then when they do sell, they don't sell for as much because you're not putting a realistic value on the items. So be very careful when you're sourcing, when you're new. Source items on a budget. That's why I always tell people, put out the free Craigslist, Facebook ads, Nextdoor apps. I'll pick up your items for free. Or, the garage sales, the thrift stores, cherry pick. Be careful. Make sure that you spend a good amount of time researching these items before you pick them up. And don't just assume. Don't just look at the sold listings. Like, I've been doing it for so long that I could usually just be really quick when I'm looking into sold listings to determine a value, sell through, how long it's going to take. But I've been doing this for 7-8 years. The newer you are, the longer you have to take the time up front to analyze that item. Sometimes that can mean, you're wasting time and you're lowering your average hourly rate. But I would rather lower my average hourly rate in the beginning to make sure that I'm buying items that are going to sell through, items that I'm actually putting a real value at, especially if you're going out sourcing for items where you have to pay up 10, 15, 20 bucks for items that are selling for 40 or 50 or 60 bucks. If you're, I do a lot of sourcing on eBay lately. I've got to analyze very carefully because it's very easy to get burned. So if you're new, these are some tips for you. Hopefully this helps. If it does, drop a comment below, let me know. I'm going to be doing a little thrift haul with my mom, hopefully soon, sharing what we found on this trip, if I can convince her. And with that being said, hopefully you have a beautiful morning. Bye.